Sato Sangamaya Tamaso Jyotirgamaya Vidyama Amritangamaya Avir Mahedhi Rudrayante Dakshinamukam Enamam Hanityam Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Lead us from the unreal to the real. Lead us from darkness unto light. Lead us from death to immortality. Reach us through and through ourselves, O Lord, and protect us evermore with your loving presence. Om, peace, peace, peace. Hi. So, my name is Swami Arupeshananda. I am Swami Vedananda's replacement. I was telling Aditya before he got here that we saw Vedananda off today in the parking lot in Hollywood. He got on a plane, he left at 12:30, and the plane took off at 4, and he's somewhere on his way to England at this point. So he'll be back in probably 3 months, but I don't know if he's going to stay in Hollywood. So like I said to Aditya, you may be stuck with me for a while. So last time we got together, I was asked to talk about the Puruṣārthas, sometimes translated as the 4 fruits of life. Probably most of you know what they are. Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha, you've heard these things. I'll go through them one at a time. The goal of life, according to Hinduism, is moksha, liberation, God realization, self-realization. These things are all equivalents. So what does it mean? What does it mean to be liberated? I think probably we have some idea of reincarnation, I would guess. I don't know if you've accepted this premise, if you call it a premise, reincarnation. But if you look at some of the literature that is available online today, for example, past life memories in children. These are very difficult to explain any other way. People have tried, and it can be done, but it is clearly contrived. The simplest explanation for past life memories in children is reincarnation. I know of one case, I don't want to get too sidetracked, so maybe I won't talk about that. So I'll just say past life memories in children are a very compelling piece of evidence for reincarnation. Another, I feel, very compelling piece of evidence is in the near-death literature. So you have, not everyone who has a near-death experience remembers their past lives. Some do, many don't. But many of them, vast majority of the near-death experiences, witness their bodies. They leave their bodies. They float up above, if it's an operating room or an accident scene or whatever it is, they will float up above the scene and actually see their body. I remember reading one account where a woman she flatlined on an operating table, and she floated up and saw her body and looked at the ceiling fan. There was a sticker on top of the ceiling fan that you couldn't see from below. And she woke up after she died and told everybody about the sticker on top of the ceiling fan, and the nurses got a ladder to actually see if she was, making this up or what. Anyway, I think it is reasonable to believe the testimony of thousands of people from all over the world for the last couple of decades who have had these experiences where they leave their body. What does this tell us? When you have an experience where you leave your body, what it tells us is that consciousness does not arise in the body. Consciousness resides in the body. So consciousness is here in this body. It was somewhere else before that. It will be somewhere else after that. So these two things, reincarnation and the idea that our consciousness survives this physical frame, I feel like these two premises are difficult to deny without some effort. You have to have some motivated reasoning to escape from this conclusion that consciousness will survive the body and that likely it will go somewhere else and inhabit some other body because that's what it's done in the past, and you'll have some other experiences in some new body. So moksha, back to the point here, the idea behind moksha is that as we don't know how we got into this particular circumstance, so we do not know what our next particular circumstance is. We are being dragged from one set of circumstances to the next, from one body to another body, in this loka or other lokas. And so the idea of moksha is freedom. We want to be free from all this. It doesn't necessarily mean that you never come back to earth. I think Guru Nanak is probably the most salient example of that. He actually chose from a position of higher consciousness to be incarnated 10 times, and those are the 10 gurus of Sikhism, right? So moksha doesn't necessarily mean, although I would also say that one of the big motivations for trying to attain moksha is a desire to escape from this existence. That is definitely one of the big motivating factors. It doesn't necessarily mean that you never come back. You can come back from a position of enlightenment if you feel at that juncture in your spiritual evolution that you would like to be of service to fellow jivas. So it's still on the table to come back here. This is also one of the teachings of Hinduism. So the goal of our life, the goal of our existence, is to achieve this moksha. What is standing in the way of our achieving moksha? Anybody? One word. Desire. Desire drags us on and on. As Sri Krishna says in the Gita, we are enslaved by action, dragged onward by desire. Desire is something, we have conscious desires, and we have desires that are much deeper than the conscious mind. And so, when we become desireless is when we achieve moksha. This is also Buddha's teaching. I think we know. Noble truth number 2, the cause of pain is desire. Desire is what drags us on and on and on in this existence. And so, yeah, go ahead.
So then what is the motivation to desire escaping the world? Why is that desire different from other desires?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's a desire not to have desire. It still counts as a desire, but it's qualitatively different than other desires. And before we go into that too much, I would like to point out this word, nishkama, no desire. It sounds kind of bland sometimes. I've heard people say that life without desire sounds boring, nothing to strive for, no goals, nothing to do. What would life be like without desires? It would lose all its zest, you could say. But we have to understand the state of desirelessness, this nishkama, is logically equivalent to the state of all desires being fulfilled, purna kama, So try and imagine having all of your desires fulfilled forever. Complete, perfect satisfaction. This is what's promised in the Narada Bhakti Sutras. Satisfaction of all desires forever. That sounds better than being desireless, and yet they are the same thing. To have all your desires satisfied forever is to be desireless. And so when we say that desire is in our way and we need to overcome it to achieve moksha, what we say is we need to have all of our desires perfectly and eternally satisfied. We need to be perfectly satisfied. That is the state of moksha, liberation, perfect satisfaction. So that sounds, if we can imagine it, it's hard to imagine, but that sounds maybe a little bit more appealing than desirelessness. Desirelessness maybe doesn't sound like something that you'd want to struggle too hard for. But to struggle hard to have every single one of your desires that you've ever had or could conceive of, all of them fulfilled, that sounds like a worthy goal. And so the question is, how do we go about this? Well, in Hinduism, desires are kind of lumped into two categories broadly. Artha and Kama, pretty much. Those are our desires. And Artha, usually translated as wealth, also means ambition, power, material gain. But also more than just material gain. I mean, power, position, fame even would be considered a kind of wealth. And so this Artha we have got to fulfill before we can get to moksha. The same idea is true with Kama. Now the question is Kama's desire. Enjoyment frequently is translated as sex, also can mean fine food, any kind of enjoyment, travel, entertainment, all that. So the question is, we all have these desires. We all want, to put it bluntly, money and sex. This is what we in the monastery renounce to the best of our ability. And also other things. We also want fine dining, travel, all this other stuff. So, how do we fulfill this desire without breeding more desires? In other words, this reminds me, actually, I wasn't going to talk about this, but since I've just thought of it. A book called From Barista to Billionaire. Anybody read it? From barista, Starbucks, to billionaire. You've read it?
I read half of it for class. It's from the Starbucks CEO, right?
No, but he worked at something like that.
Yeah.
He's not Starbucks CEO. His name is Andrew Wilkinson. He's just some billionaire you've never heard of. Anyway, but the book's actually not that interesting. The bottom line of the book is money can't buy you happiness. That's basically what the book says. He just needed to make $1 billion to figure that out. But one interesting thing he says in there, in the very beginning, he's on Wall Street screaming for money, like all these guys are doing. They have this craze for money, right? This is not Artha, this is lobha, right? Greed. So he has this super craving for money, as do all these other people that he's associating with on Wall Street. They have this question they ask each other, all these aspiring bazillionaires. What is your number? That's what they ask each other. What's your number? What does it mean? What's your number means, what number would you have to see in your bank account to stop this crazy pursuit of money? What would make you stop this? And the interesting thing he said in the book is that there is no number. It's just a factor of 2 of whatever you already have. So if you have $1 million, then you say, if I got 2 million, I would quit. If you had 2 million, you'd say 4 million. 4 million, you'd say 8 million. up until you get to 40 million. What happens when you have $40 million in the bank and they ask you this question? Now it's a factor of 10. Now you need 400 million before you'll stop doing this. You follow me? So this is basically straight out of the Bhagavatam. I don't know if you're familiar with this, but the Bhagavatam, I wrote it down. Bhagavatam 9:19-14. Desire cannot be quenched by the fulfillment of its urge. Desire increases by its fulfillment. As when clarified butter is poured over fire, it increases the ferocity of the flame. So that's exactly what happens. You keep working and working and working for this, and you get more and more money, and then you get to a certain number, and the flame just jumps up. You get to 40 million, apparently. Now you need 400 million. So this is clearly not the path to moksha. This is not how you do it. This is lobha, greed, causes more bondage. So the question is, how do we do this in such a way that we will actually satisfy our need for wealth, satisfy this need for Artha? And of course, the Hindu prescription is Dharmic. You have to acquire money dharmically. You have to obey your own personal set of ethics, your own moral code, and confine yourself to that area. Moderation. This idea of I'm going to satisfy my desire for wealth by striking it rich is exactly what the Bhagavatam says does not work. What does work, according to Hinduism and Buddhism, is this path of moderation. So what we do is we have a controlled, we earn money, there's nothing wrong with it. We major in something lucrative like computer science, like a lot of you are doing. You get a job, you work, you make a comfortable living. And what happens? You see the value of money, you see the limitations of money. More importantly, compared to, let's say, someone who decides to rob a bank, for example, and get their money that way. They get it quicker, they get more of it. But what comes with that money? Desires multiply 100-fold. Why? Because as soon as you do something like that, you are riddled with anxiety. As Sri Krishna says in the Gita, anxiety binds them with 100 chains. Did I get caught? Will I get caught? Do they know that I lied? It doesn't have to necessarily be money. It could be position. This is the approach to satisfaction of desire taken by the pamara, Sanskrit word to describe the lowest class of people in society. They can be very high up materially. They can be very wealthy, they can be successful politicians, they can be surgeons, any of these things. But the only thing that keeps them in line is fear of jail, fear of punishments. Whatever you can get it however you can possibly get it, as long as you don't get caught. Getting caught is the only crime. These are the pamaras of society. Thankfully, they are not a majority. They're the minority of society, which is essential, because without them, or with them, if they were a majority, society would not function. The majority of people are the Dharmic Vaishyas, the righteous householders, that are trying to pursue their desires within their own ethical framework. So, I guess one of the big questions that we would have, I would imagine that most of you are probably sold on this idea of Dharma. Is it true? No. Why not just go rob the bank? Well, we can see, hopefully, that desires would multiply through unethical behavior. We can see that, because what is anxiety? The first thing you do when you transgress a law is you're worried about getting caught. What is a worry? A worry about getting caught is a desire not to get caught. It's another desire, and your desires are multiplied so many times when you achieve your goal unethically. Same thing with kama, same thing with sex. If you have illicit sex, thousands of worries enter your mind. So far I haven't really actually told you any scriptural support for this. I'm just giving you psychological reasoning why you want to be good people, because you will feel better about yourself. If you instead just get it however you can get it, then what you're going to do is elevate your mental anxiety. But I suppose that I should lend some authority to it, so I will quote Krishna talking about the Pamara, this group of people whose only check on their behavior is fear of punishment. He calls them Asuras. Probably most of you know that word in the Bhagavad Gita. And he describes them. I think this is chapter 16, if I remember right. They are ceaselessly busy, piling up dishonest gains to satisfy their cravings. I wanted this and today I got it. I want that. I will get it tomorrow. All these riches are now mine. Soon I will have more. This is what they say to themselves in the blindness of their ignorance. They fall into the filthy hell of their own evil minds. That means upon death. Conceited, haughty, foolishly proud, and intoxicated by their wealth, they are enemies of all men and of myself, cruel, despicable, and vile. I cast them back again and again into the wombs of degraded parents, subjecting them to the wheel of birth and death. This is what we are trying to escape, samsara, the wheel of birth and death. And so they are constantly reborn in degradation and delusion. They do not reach me, but sink down to the lowest possible condition of the soul. So, pretty scary, I would say. I remember I was pretty intimidated by it when I read it. I think I was 18 or 19 when I first read that one. So that's sort of the scriptural supports. But what I've given to you so far is really the psychological reason why you want to try and be good and do good. And the irony of the whole situation is that if you pursue your desires within the framework, within the bounds of ethical behavior, in other words, if you exercise moderation, it turns out that you will actually get more than you will if you just run after these things recklessly. They have measured this, believe it or not. Something called the Stanford Marshmallow Test. Anybody know that one? You know that one. Both of you know that one. Okay. 3. All right. Well, for the rest, you can think about something else. I'll tell the rest of them. This is back in the 1970s. They did a study on self-control, because however convinced we are that ethical behavior is good, it doesn't necessarily mean we can do it. I think most people would like to be good. The reason they're not is not because they want to be bad, but because being good is difficult. It's hard to resist the things that you want to do. And so they did this test at Stanford back in the 1970s with a bunch of 4-year-olds. What they did was they called the 4-year-old into the office of the school psychologist. Actually, it's, the Stanford researcher who's performing this experiment. And in the office, he had a little plate with some marshmallows on it. And he told the 4-year-old, you can have 2 of these marshmallows. And he gives the kid the marshmallows. And he says, now these other 2 marshmallows, I want you to wait until I have to go out and talk to somebody. I'll be back in like 5 minutes. And I want you to wait, not eat these marshmallows. And if you can wait for 5 or 10 minutes or whatever they said, then I'll give you 4 more marshmallows. So we are going to reward gratification delay. That's the plan here. These are 4-year-olds, just old enough to understand the situation, probably. So, as you might guess, some of them could do this and some of them could not. The interesting thing about the experiment was they followed these kids for decades afterwards. They followed the 4-year-olds to see how they wound up in life. I'll read you their findings. The findings on self-control, those kids that could not eat a marshmallow for 5 or 10 minutes. Self-control was shown to be more important to academic success than intelligence. Think about that. You're all here going for academic success. You're smart enough to get in here. That means you're smart enough to do well, and you're smart enough to get out. If you don't go to the parties. If you're super smart and you can't stop partying, you're going to have a hard time getting out of here. So academic success, self-control has been shown to be more important to academic success than intelligence. More capable of effective leadership than charisma. You can see that also. How willing are you to follow someone who is making a fool out of themselves at the party? I mean, they may be fun to hang around with, they may have good jokes or whatever they do, but as far as leadership goes, that's not who we're going to follow. Self-control is more important to a successful marriage than empathy. Clearly. I mean, if you cheat on your spouse, this is going to be a problem. I actually, I know someone who was just a chronic philanderer. Somehow their marriage survived, but he just could not stop cheating on his wife. They had 3 kids. And, he got caught multiple times, thrown out of the house, all this stuff, big drama. And finally, after things kind of settled down after basically several years, actually, of philandering. And one of his friends asked him, why? Why did you do this? Why did you sleep with all these women? What's wrong with you? Why couldn't you just stay loyal? And he said, which actually kind of absolves him, at least in my opinion, somewhat. He said, I was in love with every single one of them. He fell in love with every single woman that he cheated with. That's what he said. In other words, no self-control. We have got to be able, you can't just run after every single little thing that looks good to you. If it's a person or a car or a pile of money or whatever it is, we have to have some self-control. Now it turns out, I know him, obviously, since I know that, and he actually is a very empathetic person, very loving and very kind, and very charismatic as well. But nevertheless, self-control brings us out on top. And it's odd because you think self-control means not getting what I want, or at least reducing my intake of what I want. And yet, she goes on here and says, studies have found that people with self-control lead better and more fulfilling lives than those without self-control by almost any metric. People with more self-control have higher self-esteem, more satisfying and longer relationships, better health, higher career advancements, and yes, more money. They even live longer. So, again, most of the support I've given for a dharmic path through life hasn't really been scriptural. It's just been, I guess you could call it scientific. Some of it is just common sense. So far what I've tried to do is sell you on the prospect of trying for self-control. Now the next question is, how do we go ahead.
One clarification, is the study also trying to say that self-control is some kind of ingrained thing because they tested the kids at 4 years old and that was kind of the basis of how much self-control they have?
That's a part of the study that I didn't, if they did make that claim, I didn't see it. They might have, I don't know. What I was, how to get it is what I'm gonna talk about now. Where it comes from, they're psychologists, this idea of past lives and reincarnation, they weren't really investigating that. That would be our explanation of the situation, that, those people who have self-control have been practicing Dharma before this life. They have we all apparently come into this world, according to the Hindu idea, with a long history behind us, and quite likely a long future in front of us. This is just a passing phase. Even the Muslim Jesus said this. This world is a bridge. Build no house upon it. The Muslim Jesus means you don't find that in the Bible. Jesus is considered a prophet in Islam, probably some of you know this. And so they have a lot of Jesus' sayings in their tradition as well. Anyway, so yeah, this idea that we don't come here like a tabula rasa. We're not a blank slate. We come into this world with a long history behind us, inclinations, tendencies, desires. Why are my desires different than your desires? We come into this world with desires, and some of us are happy with our desires, and some of us aren't. There was one of the grad students I worked with at UCLA. He was a errant atheist, just out and out hostile atheist. Didn't want to talk about God. If you talked about God, he'd get angry. I considered a good atheist. He's got some strong feelings about this whole thing. The bad atheist is one's like, yeah, whatever, what's on YouTube or something, right? That's the atheist that's indifferent. That is the inferior atheist. The good atheist is the angry atheist, the one who wants to fight about it. He's obviously got, it means something to him, this question. That's the point. Anyway, so he was one of those. After long association with him, I found out that the reason he was an atheist is that he was gay, and he didn't want to be gay. His father was a drill instructor in the Marine Corps, and having a gay son was completely unacceptable. And he didn't want to be an unacceptable son. He wanted to be a good son and get married and make his parents happy, and he couldn't do it. And so he was angry at God. Eventually, he came out of the closet, married a man, and became a minister, believe it or not. So, he made peace with that part of himself and then got in touch with his religion. The point is this. He had a desire, he had a want that he didn't want to want. Many of us have wants that we don't want to want. And these things will make us miserable. That's a big one. I wouldn't know, there's all kinds of ideas about how to handle that. There are smaller ones too. When this was in a monastery in Orange County. I guess it was about 10 years ago. This guy, he went to UC Santa Barbara, and he, as you know, UC Santa Barbara is a notorious party school. Probably most of you know that, yes? And it's famous across the country for being a huge party school. So he went there and he partied. And he kind of got spun around, decided to drop out. Smart enough, couldn't control himself. Back to the self-control issue. So he came to the monastery trying to kind of get his head together, I guess you could say. So he spent a summer with us there, and then he goes back home, and he calls me after a tough day, at the end of a difficult day. He calls me on the phone, and he says, I've had a really bad day, and I've got a joint, that is, a marijuana cigarette. You know what this is. I have a joint in my hand. I'd like to smoke it. Is that okay? That was a pretty funny question, I thought. He's going to call a monk in a monastery and tell him that he's got a joint in his hand and he wants to smoke it. Is it okay, monk boy, for me to smoke this joint? So I was in a bit of a bind. I couldn't just say, yeah, go ahead. You can't do that. Yeah, sure, it's fine. No, obviously he felt guilty about it. He wouldn't have called me. And I can't say no either. Because if I say no, he'll do it anyway and he'll feel worse about it. So I'm stuck in this situation where I cannot say yes and I cannot say no. by God's grace, I thought of gratification delay. I don't think I even knew about this Stanford marshmallow test. But this is a very practical thing I'm going to tell you, whatever your poison is. What do we call this? We call this a coping mechanism, right? Isn't that what we call it? His was a joint. Yours could be ice cream, Netflix, whatever it is that you do that makes you feel like, gee, I wish I hadn't done that last night. You know, there's so many of these things. He could just be calling somebody on the phone. Why did I call that person on the phone? They always make me feel bad and treat me bad or whatever. I mean, this comes in all shapes and sizes, the coping mechanism. So, what I told him, and I don't know if he did it. I'd like to think he did, but I don't know if he did. I said, go to your shrine and sit down and tell God all the reasons why your day was so bad, all the reasons you're unhappy, everything that went wrong. Let it all out. Cry if you have to. And then sit there quietly. Give the whole thing 20 minutes. However much time you need to complain, the rest of it just breathing quietly. I said, after you do that, then if you still feel like you need to smoke the joint, go do it. So, what does that accomplish? You gave God spiritual practice the first chance. You gave that the first chance, number one. Number two, the practice itself of unburdening your heart to the higher power and then sitting and breathing peacefully for a while is calming and soothing and will help you to overcome whatever your coping mechanism is. Finally, if all that fails and you still need the joint or whatever it is, after you're done, you can do it and you won't feel nearly as bad. You won't feel guilt, shame over it. Hey God, I gave you the first chance. I still needed this thing. That's a lot different than I am weak. I couldn't say no. If you just go to it immediately. So what I'm saying here, practical standpoints, we are trying to grow in self-control. It has been shown repeatedly that the way we exhibit self-control is through gratification delay. What I'm saying is spiritualize your gratification delay. We don't have somebody leaving the room for a few minutes and saying, I'll be back and give you more marshmallows. That's not where we are. We have to take this ourselves and handle it ourselves. So, in this time, 20 minutes or whatever, spiritualize our gratification delay. We will find, I promise you, try this. Next time you're up against something that makes you feel like you want to compromise your own value system, delay it and spiritualize that delay time. Turn it into some kind of worship, some kind of reflection, some kind of dialogue with God, however you conceive of God. Because I really feel that our spiritual beliefs have to help us live better here and now. Yes, the goal of life is moksha, it is liberation. That is, when I die, something wonderful will happen and I'll be free forever, however we conceive of this. But spiritual practice should make us better now. It should make us happier now. It should make us feel like we are in control of our lives now. So, also, of course, fabulous prizes when you die. I have no objection. But for now, I'll get to you. For now, spiritual life should benefit us in our daily life. And like I said in the beginning, this meditation practice, proven repeatedly to work, half an hour a day. Then I'll get to you, okay? One thing, I just want to say this one thing. They have, I feel like I said this to you guys last time, but I couldn't have because Maidanon did all the talking. This functional MRI technique. You're probably familiar with this. You know what MRI is? Functional MRI is a movie. It's an MRI movie. So, through this functional MRI technique, they have managed to isolate the part of the brain that is responsible for self-control. It is called the anterior cingulate cortex. And they have managed to map the display of self-control to the neural connectivity of the ACC, the anterior cingulate cortex. They've actually mapped this. The more neural connectivity you have in the ACC, the more self-control you will exhibit. This is, we can thank the neuroscientists for this. They have shown, as I was indicating earlier, 1 month, the half an hour a day of meditation, any kind, mindfulness, focus-based, watch your breath, whatever it is you're doing, 1 month of that, half an hour a day, gives a measurable increase in neural connectivity of the ACC. They can actually measure, after a month of this, every day, your self-control going up. Okay, go ahead.
So, mokshas are two types, right? One is like after death, who reaches a certain point, but also there is one more type of moksha, like
Jiva Mukti, right?
Yeah. End of the duality, like which essentially mean like being in present moment where you don't have any duality.
So you're talking about moksha here in the body right now.
Yeah, being in the present. So, what moksha would be like appropriate or ideal for someone to practice?
Well, I don't think the practice differs too much. I mean, the goal, when you achieve this, that would change. But for example, Ramana Maharshi's practice, one of the most famous Jiva Muktas of the 20th century, at the age of 17, you know the story of Ramana Maharshi, right? Yeah. So he willed himself to death at the age of 17 and became this Jiva Mukta. So that practice that he had, Atma Vichara, reasoning on the self, what am I, who am I, and this is what he instructed so many of his students to do. Every time you have any thoughts, whether it's good, bad, or desire or anything, you respond, who is the thinker? Who is thinking? Who is asking? Who is angry? Who is desiring? Who? That was his method, to trace the thoughts to their origin. Tracing the thoughts to their origin led to realization of self. Now, this happens through a conscious process that takes, according to most people in the field, if you call it a field, most yogic practitioners, this takes lifetimes for self-mastery. So, what that means is, start now. Don't worry that you're going to be liberated before you die. It's not that easy to do. I've been trying it for decades. Ramana Maharshi, at the age of 17, managed to pull this off. I mean, he must have a long history of effort before that. That's all I can think. Most ordinary people like me that meditate for a long time, well, we're still working at it. And I know lots of monks. So I wouldn't worry about, Jiva Mukta happening too quickly. And the practices are basically the same. It's yoga. Ramana Maharshi's yoga is primarily jnana yoga, but that doesn't really matter. That's really more of a temperamental issue. What yoga appeals to me? Is it jnana yoga, bhakti yoga, karma yoga, mantra yoga? So many different kinds of yogas are there. The question is, are we going to transcend our desires? Are we going to do that here in this life? Are we going to be liberated at death? They say it can be done, but that doesn't change us too much from the Christians or the others that say, just be a good person and then when you die, something good will happen. There is that idea in Hinduism as well. But really, what we need to do is struggle for liberation now. fact is, we have all these desires in the way. We want a successful career. We want a family. We want a relationship. We want love, and we want to be loved. We want all these things. Hinduism doesn't deny that. It acknowledges the validity of these things if they are pursued ethically. If they are pursued ethically, then these desires will be overcome. Whether that happens during this life or after this life is secondary, I would say. Not sure if I answered your question.
I'm like a little bit puzzled, so when Ramana Maharshi mentioned that you inquire your thoughts, the inquiring itself is awareness, right? If someone is reaching the level of inquiring his thought, that means he is aware of his thoughts.
Mind has that capacity to reflect on itself, yeah.
So when he is aware of his thoughts, it means like he is already in the stage of moksha.
Well, I mean, if only it were so easy, right? Mind has the capacity to reflect on itself and observe its own thoughts. That doesn't necessarily mean you're liberated immediately. I mean, it's one thing when we're thinking in the busy day. We get in the car and we think, I have to go to the post office, and I have to go to the grocery store, and I have to go call this person and pay this bill, or whatever it is we're doing, or study for this test. All these things we're thinking. And we're aware that we're thinking. We are the thinker, and at the same time we're aware that we're the thinker. That's one kind of thinking. Then there's another kind of thinking where we sit quietly, and instead of thinking about all the things that we have to do, what we do instead is we do something else. We focus on our breath, or we focus on an ishta, a chosen ideal, or we try and trace our thoughts. So many different kinds of meditations are there. The point is this: we are not trying to think, we are trying to not think. We are trying to direct our mind according to the intelligent will, the buddhi. And what happens? What we find is, during this process, thoughts happen anyway. They distract us from what we're trying to do. We are no longer the thinker, we are now the victim of our thoughts. When you practice meditation, you are confronted by the painful reality that these thoughts are going to come and have their own noise level in your mind, whether you want them there or not. So this method that Ramana Maharshi gives, I mean, it's a process where there are levels of awareness of the mind. What happens, according to him and his method, is, and you find this if you meditate too, you'll find this yourself. First, the distractions will become less toxic. So you sit down to meditate and you realize, my God, this mind is a mess. There's a whole bunch of junk in here. I was better off before I started meditating. This is a frequent complaint. I was a better person before I started meditating. No, you weren't. The difference is you didn't know what was in your mind before you started meditating. So you have a bunch of toxic distractions. Over time, they get less toxic. Then over time, they get fewer of them, until finally the mind actually calms down. And then at that point, you are getting closer to this goal of moksha. When you can trace the mind's activities behind all this crazy thinking to what is underneath, that is this idea of liberation. Jivan Mukta. So, so to just reflect on the mind doesn't mean you're liberated like that. It's a process. The mind is so chaotic, being aware of its thoughts doesn't necessarily get you out of the situation.
Yeah, it doesn't mean like if someone is aware of thoughts, they are like not liberated. Like, but being in that present moment is itself is moksha, right? Like.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah, right. If you're perfectly identified with now, that's Eckhart Tolle. Have you guys read him? Yeah. If you think about your distractions when you're meditating, what are they? They're concerns about the future or desires about the future, ruminations about the past, regrets about the past, nostalgia about the past. They're about the future and the past. So yes, if you can be perfectly identified with right now, okay. But that requires everything that I just said, all these distractions, they're still there. They happen to be about the future and the past. And yes, right now, this present moment is infinite and pure and everywhere. But try to get past all the thinking in your mind that is blocking it. It's not so easy to do. But yeah, you're right. Right now is liberation. Yes, for all of us. Yeah.
The mental chatter also comes down when someone is being awake after thoughts.
Say again, the mental...
The mental chattering.
Oh yeah, mental chattering what?
It comes down. We don't have much mental chattering when we are aware of our thoughts.
Well, you know, it's degrees.
Degrees.
Shades of gray. I mean, at first you start to meditate and you find that, and even just if you have a bad day, you know, suddenly you got evicted from your apartment. Well, how calm is your mind going to be when you sit for meditation that evening? You're going to be thinking about, where am I going to live? So naturally, much chatter will be going on because of external life situation. So one of the things that meditation is designed to help us overcome is the ups and downs that we experience through the vicissitudes of our external life situation. But even if everything is going okay, whatever we think that is, I'm not getting evicted, it doesn't look like I'm going to fail this class, my wife is not cheating on me, or whatever it is that could upset us. None of those things are happening. Even so, the mind has this level of chatter that has to be overcome. So many things can cause variations in the mind and its level of noise. But what we find, generally speaking, assuming that all these kind of external situations are more or less routine, initially we have so many distractions, many of them are shockingly toxic. As we go on, they become less toxic and fewer of them. Eventually the mind becomes calm. That's the goal. And then when the mind is perfectly calm, the mind is said to be like a window that we're polishing. When it's perfectly calm, we've polished our window, we can see through to the self, the Atman within. That's the idea. Yeah. Any other questions? Yeah.
What are like the meditation like techniques that, like for me it's like I used to meditate, I used to try to meditate daily, but like sometimes it's just so hard to find that 30-minute window in your day.
Yeah, it is.
And like how do you incorporate that in your life? Like right now I do like maybe like 5 minutes, 10 minutes daily, but like it's just so hard to like really dedicate that time to God. So.
Yeah. Two things, very practical. I've found that breaking it up is better. It's actually easier to have a routine in the morning. Evening is extremely difficult, but if you can get some time in the evening, 20 and 10 or 15 and 15, however you do it, it makes a tremendous difference. Number one, try and do it twice a day. Number two, have spiritual friends. Here you are. I mean, I feel like I almost didn't have to give this talk tonight because you've shown up to listen. The fact that you've shown up to listen means you're actually interested in living dharmically. And this is a very valuable network that you have here. Other people who are also trying to do this. You know, you got a bunch of people who have no interest in this in your life as well. They are not helping you in your practice. So, especially at this time in your life where you are in university and you got all these friends and all these activities, if you can somehow manage to cultivate spiritual relationships at this time, you will find it much easier to get into a spiritual routine. And the friends that you have that are spiritual, try and talk to them about spiritual life. Makes a big difference. This is one of the main teachings of the Narada Bhakti Sutras, that you have to try and seek out holy company. Or, failing that, solitude. I think solitude is actually less realistic here at USC than the holy company is, especially considering the fact that we're all meeting here tonight. You know, so that, practically speaking, I'd say is a great way to get some spiritual momentum. Another thing you can do if you have time is to try and actually go seek out the company of some people who have made spiritual knowledge the supreme goal of their life. So when I was at UCLA and I was a grad student, and I don't know, they have this saying about college labs. Maybe you guys, you're all science majors mostly. Maybe you know this. If it crawls and croaks, it's biology. If it stinks and pops, it's chemistry. And if it doesn't work, it's physics. So I was in the physics lab, and there's something breaking. You've got a dissertation, you've got to run an experiment, you've got to write a dissertation, and the vacuum system just broke, and you've got to fix it, and there's no parts, and blah, blah. Whatever it is. So, to try and regain my sanity, I would go to the monastery in Orange County on the weekends, not every weekend, but some weekends, and mow the lawn, and eat dinner and lunch and breakfast with the monks and meditate with them in the shrine. That would be good for a couple of weeks for me. That would recharge my batteries, give me that motivation to wake up early, practice my yoga practice, and try and keep my mind in a good place. So if you can, that's sort of focused, I guess you could say, effort at holy company. It's the same basic idea, to try and find some holy company. And for me, it was, I think it was mostly like a full, I'd come Friday night, I'd spend the full day Saturday. I think I used to mop their kitchen floor too. So I'd mow the lawn, mop the floor, go to their meditation practices, and then Sunday morning I'd leave early again back to the lab. That was enough for a couple of weeks to keep me going. Because you have a whole thought current here in this university that is going in a completely different direction. It is pointing you towards enjoyment, comma. I mean, it's on everyone's mind, not everyone, a lot of people. It's on a lot of people's minds here. That's what their focus is, that's what the purpose of their life is. To enjoy, to live the dream, baby. That's what they want to do. And so you are battling against a contrary thought current here for the most part. And so some effort to find congenial thought current, whether it's in the current group or something else, highly beneficial for maintaining a yogic practice.
Yeah, and I also want to add one more thing. When meditating, like if someone concentrate, then the thoughts gonna multiply. But if they are like completely be attentive, like even though if they are getting the thoughts, if they are aware of those thoughts, itself is already meditation, right?
Well, these are different kinds of meditation, it seems to me, that you've brought up. So, I mean, one of them is kind of a witness-based, what is it, Shakshi, witness consciousness. And the other is more focus-based, so you have an object of concentration, generally an ishta, chosen ideal. So these are different methods of meditation. But what happens when you try and be the witness, practically speaking? Some distracting thought comes up and pulls you down the river.
Again, you being that thought witness is also again witness, right? For example, you are meditating on tree, but I saw some monkey in my thoughts. Then me being witness of that monkey is also again witnessing, right?
As long as you're aware.
Yeah.
I mean, the thing is, what happens is we have all these thoughts going by like a river. We're trying to witness, and all these thoughts are going by. What the general tendency is for them to pull us into them. The monkey takes us with it. And so then after, maybe 30 seconds or a few minutes, we go, oh wait, yeah, I'm meditating my breath, and then we go back to breathing because we've been distracted by the thought currents, right?
What I'm trying to say, like,
okay.
If I'm meditating on some tree or some mountain, I'm witnessing, right?
Right.
But if suddenly my thought shift from mountain to some building, even if I'm witnessing, here my witness doesn't get any disturbance. My thoughts are shifting from one to one, but my witness is constant. Isn't that?
If it is, it may be.
Yeah.
One technique that people use for this, to sort of test if the witness presence is actually constant, the thought, you breathe slowly, you You can try it. Let's try it. So you just breathe. Try and keep your back straight, your shoulders square, and your chin up. You will find, as you practice meditation, that when your posture sags, your chin sags, your thoughts also sag. So one thing to do, make sure your posture is good. Breathe slowly in through the nose and out through the nose. And wait for a thought. When you have a thought, you echo it. Say, the mind just thought of mountain or monkey or whatever. And then you go back to breathing slowly in through the nose and out through the nose. So we see after we do that for a little while, and you can try this of course at home, that we somehow slid away from being the witness into being the thinker. It can be very subtle. But you realize without even really noticing it that now you're thinking. You're not actually focusing on your breath anymore. It doesn't have to be like the monkey or the mountain or whatever grabs you away from your witness consciousness. It can very subtly, sort of like a thief, steal you away from witness consciousness. So that meditation, very simple, obviously open to everyone. You don't have to believe in anything. It's just a calming meditation. On the other hand, that doesn't mean it's easy. Yeah.
I just want to say really quickly, like we're in the Q&A session now, so if you have any questions that you need to ask, you can ask them now. Also, you can grab snacks. And also, I just wanted to take like a poll really quickly if there's anybody who has like a topic that they want to talk about for next week.
I don't know when Holi is coming up, but you could use it.
For the Q&A,
We should end,
close it.
yes.
So which before the Q&A, we can end our session.
Okay. Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavai Tejasvinavaditamastu Ma Vidvishavai Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May the good Lord protect us. May He guide us. May He give us strength and right understanding. May our study be vigorous and fruitful. May love and harmony be with us all. All peace.